Today we're looking at the latest NHL trade rumors, focusing on teams like the Islanders, Capitals, and the newly eliminated Toronto Maple Leafs. We have some finds from last night's NHL action, with lots more talk around the playoffs, all that and more coming up next. Welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a variety of NHL news and some NHL trade rumors to take a look at here today. First up, let's talk about the latest ongoings here from the 2022 Stanley Cup playoffs. We had a really solid day of NHL Game 7 playoff action yesterday on Saturday. The teams did not disappoint. We saw 3 Game 7s back to back, and they were all really solid, highly entertaining games. We saw the Carolina Hurricanes defeat the Boston Bruins 3-2 in the first Game 7 of the night. The Canes move on to round number 2. They did have a bigger lead. I believe it was 3-1. The Bruins scored a late one to make it interesting, but a little bit too little, too late. Carolina hangs on. All the other games in Carolina were a bigger deficit, so certainly interesting to see a tighter, closer game. The Bruins certainly did everything they could, but Carolina was just a little bit too much at home. It was really a homer series. All home teams won every single game, with Canes having the home ice advantage. It certainly played a big role in this case. You have to wonder, is this the last of the Patrice Bergeron era in Boston, or perhaps the last of the Patrice Bergeron career? Is he going to be back? Will he be in Boston? Would he consider playing elsewhere? We don't know. Of course, he was even asked this in his post-game media availability, and he said it's too raw, too fresh, didn't want to discuss it, had no idea. So we will see. I mean, there's a lot of people that are convinced that he's likely to retire, and there's some, including what we talked about a few days ago from NBC Sports, like Tony Amonte said he thinks there's a chance he goes to Montreal. So we'll see. The future for Patrice Bergeron is certainly interesting, and we'll have to wait for a while at least to get a clearer idea on his future, but that's certainly one of the big storylines coming out of that game. I know at the end of the game he was giving all his teammates hugs and everything, which isn't really unusual for him when they lose, so we'll see, but certainly lots of speculation about his future. In the Edmonton Oilers LA Kings game, the Oilers come up with a 2-0 victory. Mike Smith with the shutout. Connor McDavid was on a mission and made sure his team got all the way through Game 7 with a victory here. It's the last game for Dustin Brown and the LA Kings. Dustin Brown had previously announced that he was retiring once the playoffs were over for the Kings, so that's the end of the line for him. A long-time NHL career, another 2003 draft member that's going to be calling it a day here. We saw Ryan Getzlaf recently make that announcement. Will we see more, as we just talked about? Certainly a lot of those players getting to that point in their lives and careers where the end is either here or near. So we will see where things go on that front. And of course, the other big Game 7 that got probably the most attention, at least on a more national scale, was the Maple Leafs and the Tampa Bay Lightning. At this point, it was a back and forth series where Leafs win, Tampa wins, Leafs win, Tampa wins, Leafs win, Tampa wins, but then Tampa wins again. They win Game 6 and Game 7, including the Game 7 game in the Maple Leafs home arena with a 2-1 victory. And the Leafs unfortunately fall in round 1 in Game 7. Yet again, this is not a broken record. This is not Groundhog Day. You did hear that correctly, unfortunately, for the Leafs. They had a hell of a solid year, a record-setting year in so many ways in the regular season. We saw so many good things. Austin Matthews scored 60 goals. Look at the wins and the point totals, and everything was just phenomenal with this team all regular season. Everybody thought, many people at least thought, this was the year that you could at least get over the hump. I mean, a lot of the odds makers and the betting places had them as one of the top teams with the best odds to win the cup, at least at the beginning. And this happens again. Now, a very interesting stat that I came across on Twitter, and I'll show you the tweet here. Apparently, the Maple Leafs are the first team in pro sports, excluding NFL. So look at the team sports that use a series for playoffs. Obviously, NFL is a different format, single game playoffs. So they're a different unique situation there. But NHL, NBA, and MLB. So the 3 big sports that all have the same sort of format for playoffs. They are the only team in history to lose the deciding game in the first round of the playoffs 5 straight consecutive years. So that's certainly not a stat that you want to be a part of. That's not something you want to achieve, obviously. The Leafs obviously were quite distraught after the loss. many of which were visibly emotional, upset, which you completely understand. I know I really feel for a guy like Jason Spezza, who's been there chasing the cup the last few years after playing a long time in Dallas and Ottawa, trying to get himself a cup with his hometown team before he wraps it up. Is it the end of the line for him? He's another guy. When the team's eliminated, you have to question, is he going to play next year? Does he want to? Will the Leafs have him back? There's lots of question marks in that regard, and it was a real solid game. Nick Paul was the big story for Tampa. Scores both of Tampa's goals. The only player in Lightning history to score their very first goal, playoff goal with the Lightning in a Game 7. So it's not only his first goal with the Lightning in the playoffs, it was his first goal, period, in the playoffs. Obviously, previously playing in Tampa, he was a Senator, and the Senators obviously went to the playoffs lost in 2017. So he was still in the minors at that point, like during his time as a regular or fairly regular NHL player. The last couple of years, they weren't in the playoffs. So this is his first taste of playoff hockey. So he certainly did well. Obviously, there's a lot of comparisons over this year's Tampa's third line group of Nick Paul, Ross Colton, and Brendan Hagel compared to the previous third line for the last couple of years of Gaudreau, Blake Coleman, and Yanni Gourde. It's fair to say that you could probably say that the third line from the past 2 years was probably stronger, deeper line, but this line's proven to be pretty good too, and they played a big role in Tampa's victory here over the Toronto Maple Leafs. I know at one point there was certainly I guess the Leaf fans consider it a controversial goal, and by Leaf fans we're going to say not everybody, of course. I don't want to sound like I'm generalizing, but when you look at social media and you see the reaction of fans, it seemed like it was fairly overwhelming that the John Tavares goal was disallowed because of a penalty call against Justin Hall for interference. I know it seemed like there was a big group that totally disagreed with that call. I am not in that camp. That was 100%. And if you can't look at that and say that's a penalty, then I'm not really sure what else to say to you, because certainly to me, that's 100% a legit call. Justin Hall completely set a pick and interfere with Anthony Cirelli, his ability to chase and try to track down John Tavares before he could get a shot away. So it had a big impact on a scoring chance. You could see Justin Hall, as he was coming in for a number of feet back, that he was targeting to come in and try to take out Cirelli. It's obvious, it's blatant, it's clear. Now, are there missed calls on other parts of the ice throughout different games throughout the series? I'm sure there was. I'm sure if we really look back at the whole series, and not only them, but the whole playoffs, there's missed calls. Being an NHL referee, not an easy job. I'm not giving them an easy pass here because they do make mistakes. They are human. Things do happen, and there is a bit of a subjectivity to certain calls too, and NHL referees will openly admit that. We've seen a lot of more retired referees like Tim Peel, Dave Jackson, etc. on social media talking about this kind of stuff. They're kind of giving you an inside look as to how things work. There is a level of subjectivity to some degree. So, I know we want a consistent refereeing. Some fans will be like, well, I don't care what a penalty is as long as it's consistent. And it's consistently inconsistent in my opinion, but all teams are impacted. To see a lot of Leaf fans today blatantly blaming the refs for the loss is just mind-boggling to me. How about putting some accountability on the players? Every team could complain about the refs to some degree, in my opinion. It's just the nature of sports. I've been a part of, obviously not at a pro level, but in all the sports I've played in my life, there's lots of disagreements with the refs on both sides. I've seen it at the NHL. Like I said, you rarely go through an NHL game where each team at some point doesn't get frustrated. It's just the nature of the sport. And to blame the refs for the loss, to me, is just a lame excuse. And you need to look at things more objectively. But it amazes me, and it shouldn't, I guess, because it is tough as a fan to look at plays without bias and to automatically find a way to justify favoring your team. That's just how people work, I guess. So far we know in round 2 we're going to have a Battle of Florida, Tampa versus Florida, and we know that we're going to have the Canes playing the Rangers or the Penguins. So in the Eastern Conference, that's going to be your final 2 series. Of course, we'll find out tonight, Rangers or Penguins, who will face the Canes. And in the West, we have Avs versus Blues, and we're going to have the Oilers play either the Flames or the Stars. So hopefully, it'd be nice to see the Battle of Alberta. I know it'll be a really intense series, so I know Dallas is hoping for a different outcome. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll get 2 more Game 7s here starting in just a little while. The first Game 7 will be going within about an hour of recording this. For the Penguins tonight, Tristan Jarry is expected to be your starting goaltender, and there's a good chance that Sidney Crosby is going to play as well. There has been some clarifications from a variety of sources on Twitter indicating that Sidney Crosby actually was not diagnosed with a concussion. After the game, apparently he did have, I guess what you would call some concussion symptoms, such as a headache, but he ended up passing the concussion test they put him through afterwards, and he's had no other symptoms or anything come back since, is what is being reported. And then it's going to be a game time decision, and if the doctors say he's okay, he's going to go tonight. So obviously Crosby has a history there, and he's going to be careful and do the right thing to look after himself regardless of what's at stake. At least that's what I believe he would do. There was a couple of fines handed out for yesterday's action as well. Brendan Smith of the Canes was fined $2,000 for an elbow on David Pastrnak of the Bruins. Now onto the trade rumors for today. There's lots of talk around teams that are recently eliminated. So let's start here with Washington. Of course, they've been out now for just over a day or so. So they were out on Friday night. So they're doing their post-season media availability, wrapping things up here today. We did get some comments from GM Brian McClellan, as well as some of the players, kind of giving us an idea what to look at here. Apparently, Alex Ovechkin was dealing with a shoulder injury, which is not surprising. We did see him get hurt, and he didn't miss time, so I figured he must have been dealing with something. And Nicholas Backstrom also talked about the fact that he's still having issues with his hip. So he's not really sure what the future is going to hold, but he said he needs to figure something out. The hip is very unlikely to get back to 100%, but he's, as far as what his offseason is going to look like, whether or not he, is able to go at the beginning of next season, it's kind of unclear. He didn't really say that he wouldn't play next year or nothing like that. He said he wants to keep playing. He loves hockey. It's part of his life and has no intentions of quitting. If he's able to play, he's going to play. But, he's going to probably be dealing with some doctors and some issues and trying to figure out, what he can do, and whether it's a rehab or it's another surgery. There's a lot of question marks there. So the future of Nicholas Backstrom does have some question marks on it. And like I said, he's not intending to retire unless his health forces him to. But certainly some, a player to keep an eye on the offseason, because that's a big loss for them if he's not able to play. But according to Brian McClellan, he said, after 4 straight years of first-round exits, which is another team, since they won the Stanley Cup in 2018, have not won a playoff series, that changes are definitely coming. And he outlined his top priority is bringing in a veteran goaltender. So it seems unlikely that they'll return with the tandem of Ilya Samsonov and Vitek Vanacek. Now, it's possible. He did stress the possibility that they could both return. They're both restricted free agents as well, so they need new contracts for next year. I don't know which one's more likely to stay or go, but I know there was some rumors about Samsonov earlier. There was back, I think about a month or two ago, there was some talk about the Montreal Canadiens being interested, because there was some talk that he might become available after the offseason. Now, of course, Montreal has some big question marks as well with the future of Carey Price and all that. So it's really difficult to say if they're going to need goaltending help or not. But that was just one of the teams that was mentioned. I don't really have additional info to suggest that they're wanting to trade for him or anything like that. But the fact is that Washington will definitely be having lots of goalie conversations, probably around both guys, kind of generating some conversations on to test the market on both, see what kind of return they can get. And obviously, they're looking for a veteran goalie, which may or may not come from that trade. Could come from free agency or a separate deal to bring in some, another goalie to help out. Now, could they try to bring back Braden Holtby? I don't know if they want to go with a goaltender that's kind of a little bit older like him, or if they want to try to find, when they said a veteran goalie, maybe they want somebody who's maybe late 20s, but a little bit more established in what they have. I'm not really sure, how much of a veteran they want to go with here, but certainly, I don't think they're afraid of an older goalie, because they were really hardcore going after Marc-Andre Fleury before the deadline. They really want to have an upgrade in goal going into the playoffs, and they didn't get it. And I'm not going to say that that's completely the reason why they lost, but it certainly could have helped. But obviously they were dealing with a lot of injuries. They lost Tom Wilson early on to an injury. Ovechkin and Backstrom were playing, but weren't 100%. TJ Oshie's been banged up a lot this year. The team is getting older, and the team was heavily banged up. So I think they did a really good job to get it as far as they did. And if they would have squeaked by Florida, they might have ran out of gas in the next round. It's difficult to say, but According to Brian McClellan, changes are definitely coming, with goaltending being right at the top of the list. Now, onto the New York Islanders. Another article today on Eyes on Isles from James Nichols, looking at some potential trades here for Lou and the Islanders. Of course, we have some question marks about who the coach is going to be. We know that they're likely looking to add at least one forward, probably one defenseman if they can make it work. Probably going to need to shed some salary, and there's some talk here in this article about how they could do that, and it's a suggestion here that they target Kevin Fiala at the Minnesota Wild. Now, according to James Nichols, his article thinks that good chance that Fiala gets moved, and there's also an Athletic article from Wild beat writer Michael Russo, who's very well connected with that team, who also feels there's a high chance that Fiala gets moved as well. So when there's that many reporters indicating this, I think there is a better chance. I know near the end of the regular season, Wild fans had already kind of heard some of the rumblings about the offseason because of the cap crunch, and we're already saying like they need to find a way to keep this guy. He's just too valuable. But in the playoffs, he did not have a good playoff at all. You saw Kirill Kaprizov really lighting it up. Fiala was, I wouldn't call him a no-show, but he didn't do a lot compared to what we saw in the regular season. So I honestly do think that a trade is quite likely. Now, in the Nichols article for the Islanders, he's suggesting maybe their first-round pick, which was number 13 overall, in Anthony Beauvillier. That's a possibility. If they don't want a guy like Beauvillier, because he does come with some money attached, which is going to be less than Fiala, but if they want to go even less to get more flexibility, maybe they go with an even younger player like Kiefer Bellows or perhaps an Oliver Wahlstrom. Something like that might be interesting here for Minnesota. Nichols also goes on to mention that he expects the Islanders to try to create some cap flexibility, whether Beauvillier is used in a Fiala trade or elsewhere. Otherwise, that is a good chance a guy like Beauvillier or Bailey are moved kind of as a cap casualty to create some space in some capacity. Hopefully a guy like Bo could be used to bring back a better player like Fiala. Even Bellows and Wahlstrom are mentioned as potential trade baits along with their first round pick. So that's 5 assets, a couple of which are more for, well, at least one in the case of Bailey for like a cap purpose, and Beauvillier, Bellows, Wahlstrom, and a first rounder, which is risky though, because that's a lot of your youth. You don't have a deep prospect pool. You have a couple interesting prospects, but nothing too much of a sure thing or high end. So you want to be careful there. And these guys have struggled with their development. So it's interesting to see what happens. But I do agree that a player like Fiala to play with Barzal is certainly something that should be top priority for them. But it's going to depend on the price tag. And now the article for Russo and the Athletic talking about Fiala, they also mention the Ottawa Senators as being a likely destination. We talked before about how heavily Minnesota and Ottawa were scouting each other leading into the trade deadline for a number of weeks. We saw it on both sides, heavy scouting. And we wondered if that probably was more likely going to be like an off-season deal with Fiala maybe being involved. There was some talk about maybe Colin White being on the Ottawa side of things. I don't know. We'll see, but certainly a real possibility here that Fiala is on the move. Now that the Wild are out, it's something that's going to be talked about and discussed a little bit more. There'll likely be a little bit more intel and rumors around it, and we'll see. Now, onto the Maple Leafs. Now, of course, there's already lots of Leaf reporters jumping in here the day after the elimination of Game 7, as we talked about before, speculating on how the Leafs are going to react. What are they going to do? Are we going to see significant changes, like almost no changes? Are they going to run it back? What are they going to do? This is 5 years in a row, out in the first round. Can't get over that hump. It's been a different opponent each time. Different kind of issues. But I think a lot of people are kind of summing things up to say, you know what, though? This series was different in the sense that they had a heck of a series. Like, it was a highly entertaining series. They were basically within one goal of defeating the Lightning, the back-to-back Stanley Cup champions. Like, this time, at least, like there's not a big epic collapse or an embarrassing type of loss. Like, there's nothing to be embarrassed about here. You lost to a really good team in 7 games by 1 goal. But there is obviously things to look at here to say, but you also had an opportunity in Game 4 to take a stranglehold in the series, and you didn't do it. You didn't show up. You were down 5-0, not even a full period into the game. You lost Game 6. You lost Game 7. And looking at the Lightning last night, they just had more killer instinct, more desire to go out and grab that win. Blocking shots all over the place, just going that extra mile, that extra effort. In Toronto, they were playing well, but you didn't see it was a different style. I'm just not sure what they need to do. According to all the different reporters you can look at, there's articles from The Athletic, from James Myrtle. There was Sportsnet articles. It's a big talk, big discussion point. And the two names that come up the most here for changes is Peter Mrazek and Jake Muzzin. Now, Peter Mrazek, we know they're not happy with. Did not work out. He still has a couple of years at $3.5 million. I think that's an easy one, and pretty much everybody analyzing this team will agree with that the Leafs are going to do. A lot of the big reporters on Sportsnet and Hockey Night in Canada last night, they're all kind of mostly in the same boat, saying they don't think Sheldon Keefe or Kyle Dubas are really at risk or should be at risk to be fired, that they've done a really good job for the most part, and that maybe some more tweaks. That seems to be the general consensus amongst a lot of people, like talking about this on TV and in different reports that I've read here today in articles. I don't know. I mean, there is some reports, and I don't know if GM contracts are not made as public as like players and stuff, right? But there is talk that Kyle Dubas is without a contract beyond this year, so it will be interesting. But if I'm Leafs management, to be honest, or at least ownership, sorry, I don't really think I make significant changes in that aspect of things. I think it has to be on the players. I think that management has given this team a lot of resources to win. I think they have a really good coach behind the bench, and it is, for whatever reason, can't get over that hump. But they are closer. We did see a lot of good things this year, lots of great things, lots of development, lots of big steps. So to me, I think they probably do make some tweaks, but how deep those tweaks are, I don't know. Because keep in mind, the definition of doing the same thing over and over and over, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, but expecting a different result. I don't see that. Because of the cap alone, there's bound to be some changes. It's a matter of how deep. Now, Jake Muzzin's name has come up a lot because of a couple of things. One, he's got contract $5.6 million for 2 more years, getting a little bit older. Do they go with a younger blue line, go with try to divvy up the money different so that they have a little bit more flexibility, kind of expand their role for guys like Liljegren, Sandin? But you know what? He has a no-trade clause. And getting a Jake Muzzin trade done is not going to be an easy task. So that's tough. But those are the names that are being mentioned right now. But you have to wonder, are they going to bring back the same core 4 player? Now, to me, Matthews, Marner, and Tavares aren't going anywhere. Now, Tavares has a full no move. He's not going to, and I can't see him waving, even if they talk to him. So he's not going anywhere. Matthews and Marner, I think they'd be crazy to trade them. If anybody in the Big Four gets traded, and I've been saying it for years, it's Nylander, because it's the best value. Like, although he's got his flaws, William Nylander's an excellent hockey player for what the kind of money he makes, and I think really he needs to change his game a little bit in some respects. Like, it's nice to see a little extra effort, like in Game 6 when he was skating into the corner and completely gave up and did not go hard to try to get that puck. He just kind of gave up on it. Like that's rough to see, and you see that from Nylander sometimes when he's changing. He doesn't hustle to the bench all the time. Like, he's like Kyle Dubas said it best. He is the kind of guy who can drive you nuts, but at the same time do things that many players can't do and make you smile that he's on your team. Like, he can be a yin and yang at times, right? So I don't know. I mean, if they were to move somebody from the Big Four, to me, it's probably him, but it's so hard. They have Jack Campbell, who they need to bring back, in my opinion, as a starting goaltender. Is going to be due for a big raise. That's going to be very challenging to do. They don't have a lot of cap space. They do need to find a way to shed some money, and something's got to give. Like I said, the cap alone is going to dictate some changes, but how deep those changes go and what kind of reaction or overreaction or underreaction we get is up for debate. It's early. We're only the day after. We will see in the coming days if we can kind of get a better sense of where things might be heading, but it could be a little while longer before we really get to that point, closer to like the draft when all the big business tends to be taken care of. So let me know what you think and what's going to happen here for the Leafs. The Mrazek, Muzzin, are those the names you think are going to be most likely to move? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to this channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.